Welcome back, video 6, the final video in the RADIX intro series. If you've made it here from video 1, you've covered more ground than most people who call themselves serious students of astrology ever reach. Just going to check a couple things on here really quick. The system sends the weekly transits to your email, and you can see what the transits are in the email. But for deeper insights, I can click on this banner and read the transits and talk to the oracle, or just go to the alerts area and ask the oracle. The oracle will give you a complete breakdown of what all of this week's transits mean for you. So now the oracle is pulling together everything from my chart and the aspects to give me the breakdown. I'm currently using this on desktop while making this video, but it works the same way in mobile. When you check the RADIX email, you can click the button that says Open RADIX, and it will open the app. From there, you can click the button at the top left to open the left side panel. From there, you can see the alerts button, which will be flashing when you have new alerts. I just wanted to show you really quickly how that works because for me, it's a really fun way to start the week when the email fires off at 8 a.m. every Monday. I'm actually excited to see what the oracle has to say about the week ahead, and I always check the week ahead forecast in RADIX News as well. It's yet another tool to help me see what's coming, but on the world stage. My transits are for me personally, and the forecast report is to help me understand the world around me. Okay, now that I've showed you that feature, let's move on to what this video is all about. The system is essentially in your hands. This final video does several things. We start with the complete integrated picture, all the layers working together. Then I want to address two things that haven't come up yet in this series, but that shape how RADIX works in ways worth understanding. The outer planets, and why this tradition treats them differently, and the house system RADIX uses and why that choice matters more than most people realize. Then we'll look honestly at the app landscape, and we'll close. Let's finish this. Here's the complete traditional astrology system that RADIX is built on. At the foundation, your natal chart. 7 classical planets in 12 houses, 14 Arabic lots, adding a hidden layer of sensitivity. Every planet assessed for dignity its capacity to deliver on its domain based on sign, house, aspects, and condition. The second layer, for Daria, the multi-year arc, major and minor periods, the planetary governor of the current chapter of your life. The third layer, annual perfections, the yearly cycle, the activated house, your lord of the year. The fourth layer, transits through the filter of the timing layer, not in isolation, the critical windows identified, and the oracle synthesizing all of it for your specific chart, your specific questions. 5 layers, 1 integrated system. This is what the series has built toward. Now, let's go deeper on 2 things. Most astrology content never addresses properly. You may have noticed that throughout this entire series, we've worked exclusively with the classical 7 planets. The Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. No Uranus, no Neptune, no Pluto. And you might reasonably be wondering, does RADIX ignore the outer planets entirely? Is this just an oversight or a philosophical position? It's a deliberate design decision. RADIX is built on the Bonatti tradition. 7 classical planets, no outer planets as part of the core system, but a RADIX does include the outer planets separately as a distinct layer. Understanding why is worth a moment. Here's the underlying principle. The 7 classical planets. The 7 wanderers that astrologers have tracked for over 4,000 years are the 7 celestial bodies visible to the naked eye. Every civilization that developed astrology independently arrived at the same 7, not 8, not 10, 7. The Mesopotamians tracked them. The ancient Greeks built on that tradition. Medieval Arabic scholars refined it. Bonatti systematized it. All working from the same observational base, what you can see with your own eyes from the surface of the earth. There's a philosophical argument embedded in this that the tradition takes seriously. The planets visible to the naked eye are the ones most immediately and directly present in human experience. They're part of the sky that every person throughout history could see, track, and relate to. Their cycles are human scale. Saturn takes 29 years, Jupiter takes 12. These are durations that map onto a human life in meaningful ways. Uranus wasn't discovered until 1781. Neptune in 1846. Pluto in 1930. They've been part of the astrological conversation for a very short period of time, and the dignity framework, the timing techniques, the entire interpretive architecture of traditional astrology was developed without them. Assigning Uranus rulership of Aquarius or Neptune rulership of Pisces is opinion, not doctrine. RADIX doesn't do that. What RADIX does include is the outer planets as a separate, clearly labeled layer, not as traditional astrological actors, but because of observable historical patterns that are genuinely hard to dismiss. The 84-year Uranus cycle, the 248-year Pluto cycle, that the way Neptune's sign transits correlate with recognizable shifts in collective mood and culture across centuries. These patterns exist, and they're mappable. RADIX tracks them and makes them visible not as part of the Bonatti system, but alongside it as a distinct layer with a different purpose. The role they play in RADIX, generational undercurrents, the long stage that everything else is performed upon. Here's where generational undercurrents become genuinely compelling, and where the outer planets show their value as stage setters rather than personal timing planets. Uranus takes 84 years to complete one orbit, so every 84 years, Uranus returns to the same sign it occupied 84 years before, bringing the same broad civilizational theme back into focus under new conditions. Uranus is currently entering Gemini. And the historical pattern of Uranus and Gemini for the United States is striking enough that it was used to successfully predict World War II a decade before it happened. The Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1782. Uranus in Gemini, the nation being born through fundamental conflict. Exactly 84 years later, 1858 to 1866. Uranus in Gemini again, the Civil War, the nation being torn apart and reconstituted through the most consequential internal conflict in its history. Exactly 84 years after that, 1942 to 1949, Uranus in Gemini, World War II, global conflict on an unprecedented scale, with the United States at the center of it. And now, exactly 84 years after that, Uranus is entering Gemini again. The pattern doesn't determine what happens. It sets the stage. The specific actors, the specific events, the specific people will be shaped by their own charts, their own Ferdaria periods, their own Lords of the Year. But the backdrop, the kind of era we're entering, has historical rhymes that are hard to dismiss. Pluto takes 248 years to orbit the Sun. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 1778 to 1798, the era of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the overthrow of monarchical systems across the Western world, the era when the radical idea that ordinary people could govern themselves replaced centuries of assumed hierarchy. In 2024, Pluto moved fully into Aquarius for the first time in 248 years, almost exactly coinciding with the 250th birthday of the United States. The United States was born under Pluto in Aquarius. It's now experiencing its Pluto return, returning to the exact position it occupied at the nation's founding. Pluto, returning to where a country was born, is a civilizational reckoning. The themes of the founding revolution, self-governance, the balance between collective power and individual liberty, are being fundamentally revisited and contested. And the technology that defines this era expresses pure Aquarian themes. Aquarius, whose nature in the classical tradition involves the elevation of the collective, the systematic, the communal over the individual, is expressing itself through networks, collective intelligence, the democratization of information. AI is arguably the most concentrated expression of Aquarian themes ever to manifest a network intelligence emerging from the collective, transforming every domain of life simultaneously. Aquarius and Leo share an axis. They're opposite signs, and that polarity is always operating simultaneously. When Pluto moves through Aquarius, it activates the Leo-Aquarius spectrum. Aquarius is the network, the collective, the technology, the system. Leo is the individual, the king, the celebrity, the creative sovereign. What you see emerging in this era is both poles simultaneously. The big tech billionaires concentrated individual power at a scale that makes ancient kings look modest, and simultaneously, ordinary people living more like kings than any generation in history. YouTube, social media, the ability of a single individual with a phone to build an audience of millions and live a life of creative sovereignty that would have been unimaginable even 30 years ago. The influencer is genuinely a Leo Aquarius phenomenon. One person expressing themselves with the full drama of Leo, amplified by Aquarian technology to reach a collective of millions. That's not a trend. That's the signature of this era written into the sky. Neptune has just moved into Aries, completing its long transit through Pisces and beginning a new chapter. Looking back at what Neptune and Pisces produced, it's a sign of boundlessness, dissolution, mysticism, and the merging of the real with the imagined. That era expressed those themes with unusual intensity. Dissolving boundaries, spiritual seeking, mass escapism, the borders between the real and the fictional becoming increasingly permeable. Confusion or delusional states of belief detached from more grounded pragmatic thinking. This influence also brings about propaganda or what sounds good but not rooted in observable reality, where those less rooted are more likely to follow an imagined path, leading people into a labyrinth of ideas and dreams they confuse as reality. Social media, the opioid crisis, the proliferation of alternative realities, the rise of conspiracy thinking as a mass phenomenon, all of it expressed the Neptune and Pisces combination perfectly. Neptune and Aries is a different thing entirely, and we're in it now. Aries is fire, initiation, identity, the warrior. Neptune in Aries historically correlates with ideological fervor, the sense that an idea is worth fighting for, dying for, worth igniting a conflict over. The last time Neptune was in Aries was the mid-1800s, the era of nationalist movements across Europe, the ideological intensity that preceded the Civil War in America, the first stirrings of the ideological conflicts that would shape the following century. The ideological fervor already visible in the cultural landscape, the sense that ideas are tribal identity markers, worth fighting over, worth sacrificing social bonds for, and that's a Neptune and Aries signature arriving before the planet has even completed its ingress. These outer planet patterns don't tell your personal story, but they tell the story of the era you're living that personal story in. Both layers are real. RADIX uses the classical 7 as the primary interpretive framework because that's what the timing techniques are calibrated to, but the oracle is aware of the outer planet context, and when it's relevant, it's part of the picture. Now, I want to talk about something that might seem like a technical detail, but actually makes a real difference in the precision of your chart. The house system. If you've used other astrology apps or software, you've probably encountered Placidus. It's the most common house system in modern Western astrology. And as I'll get to shortly, it became the default, largely by historical accident, not because it was proven superior. RADIX uses Alcabitius, and that choice is intentional and specific. Alcabitius is a time-based house system named after the 10th century Arab astrologer Alcabisi. It works by taking the diurnal arc of the ascendant, the arc the ascendant travels from its rising to its setting, and dividing it into equal time segments. The house cusps are determined by where those equal time divisions intersect the ecliptic. What this produces is a house system where the houses are distributed more evenly and proportionally than in many competing systems. The ascendant-descendant axis is central to the calculation, giving it particular precision around the most personal axis of the natal chart. Alcabitius was the standard house system used by medieval astrologers, including Bonatti. It was the system the tradition was built on, tested on, the interpretive meanings of the houses, the specific significance of planets. In angular versus cadent houses, the weight given to the ascendant, were all developed using Alcabitius. So let's be concrete about what those houses actually mean in this tradition, because modern astrology has significantly reframed several of them, and RADIX follows the original. The first house, the helm, the body, physical constitution, the native's vitality and appearance, the I am that steers everything else. The condition of the ascendant and its ruling planet shapes how the native shows up in the world at the most fundamental level. The second house, called the Gate of Hades in the Hellenistic tradition, not as a dire omen, but because it cannot see the ascendant by major aspect. This is the house of livelihood. Possessions, money, what the native gathers to sustain the body. Material resources in the direct, practical sense. The third house, the goddess. Siblings, neighbors, short journeys, daily communication, the routines and rituals that knit the immediate world together. In older sources, this house also covers dreams and local divinatory practice. The fourth house, the subterranean known as hypogean, ancestry, family lineage. The household, land, hidden things, buried matters. The end of life and what the native leaves behind. The foundation, what was laid before the native, and what they leave when they go. One half of the parental axis, the fifth house, good fortune, known as Agatha-taiki. Children, lovers, gifts received, pleasure, creative play. One of the two houses entry into the ascendant, so what arrives here tends to arrive easily. What comes to the native through favor, beauty, and delight. The sixth house, bad fortune, known as Kakai-taiki. This is the house modern astrology has most significantly reframed. In the Bonatti tradition, the sixth is about bondage and constraint illness as the body's confinement, subordination, those who labor for the native. In the old tradition, it was the house of slavery. Modern sensitivity has changed this to something more palatable to people today, but the true house meeting is lost with this change. Mars has its joy here because the planet's harsh activity is contained in this house. This is not the modern service and wellness house. This is where body and circumstance impose their limits. The seventh house, the Seton, known as Dices. Marriage and committed partnership. Open enemies, those who oppose the native directly. The courtroom, where the native meets the other in direct confrontation or union. The eighth house, the idle place. Death, not necessarily physical death alone, but the ending of a condition, the cutting off of a state. The inheritance that flows from death, the estate of the deceased. Fear, called idle because planets here cannot express their force directly into the native's own affairs with full effectiveness. The ninth house, spiritual orientation, a god, long-distance travel, foreign lands, philosophy, higher learning, prophecy, divinatory wisdom, religion, where the native goes to find what the local world cannot contain. The 10th house, the midheaven, the king, the native's action in the world, reputation, rank, sovereignty, the craft or office that defines public station, what the native commands and is known for. The second half of the parental axis, the 11th house, the good daemon, known as Agathos daemon. Patrons, friends in high places, allies, the favor of authority, hopes, gifts from those who can give them, distinct from the fifth's personal pleasure. This is the wealth and aid that arrives through alliance and elevation. Jupiter has its joy here, the 12th house, the bad daemon, known as Kakos daemon. Hidden enemies, secret malice, isolation, confinement, exile. Not primarily the modern unconscious or spirituality. This is what acts on the native from beyond view. Saturn has its joy here because Saturn's weight operates from the shadows. Now the framework that determines how much force any planet has within these houses. The 12 houses divide into 3 groups based on their relationship to the chart's 4 angles. The 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. Angular houses, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th, are the chart's power positions. Planets in angular houses act with full force. Their influence is direct, prominent, and capable of producing visible, tangible results. A timing lord in an angular house has the strength to deliver its period's themes clearly and effectively. Succedent houses, the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th, are moderate in strength. Planets here can act and produce results, but with less immediacy than angular positions. Cadent houses, the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th, are the weakest positions for direct action. Planets in cadent houses are hampered. Their energy is dispersed. Their ability to produce concrete external results is reduced. This holds regardless of essential dignity. A Jupiter in domicile in the 12th house is still a cadent Jupiter. It operates from the background, not from a position of direct force. We covered this framework in video 4 as part of accidental dignity, but it belongs here too, because the house system that determines where planets fall in these 3 categories is exactly what Alcabitius is calculating. Every house cusp is a judgment about which degree marks the transition from angular to succedent to cadent. Use a different system, and you get different judgments about which planets are in power positions and which are not. A planet that appears angular in Placidus might be succedent or cadent in Alcabitius. The dignity assessment changes, the timing interpretation changes. That's why the house system is not a cosmetic choice. Here's the honest history of how house systems got adopted and why it matters. Placidus became dominant in the 19th and 20th centuries because it was in Raphael's Ephemeris, the reference that sat on every astrologer's shelf, not because practitioners compared it against alternatives and found it superior. Not because it was validated through centuries of predictive work, because it was the default in a popular reference book. Placidus has a significant problem at higher latitudes. Above roughly 60 degrees latitude, it produces houses that are wildly distorted, some houses enormous, adjacent houses nearly disappearing. This is a known technical limitation. Alcabitius doesn't have this problem. To understand exactly why many astrologers, particularly traditional and medieval practitioners, argue that Alcabitius is a more reliable house system, we have to look at how it handles the mathematics of time and space compared to the quirks of modern favorites. Proponents of Alcabitius make a strong case for its superiority based on mathematical elegance, historical track record, and proportion. Here's the breakdown of why Alcabitius is favored by its proponents and why the other systems are often heavily criticized. The case for Alcabitius being more reliable, mathematical elegance and focus. Alcabitius is a time-based quadrant system, but its logic is very focused. It calculates the diurnal arc of the ascendant, meaning it measures the exact amount of time it takes for the degree rising on the eastern horizon to travel up to the midheaven, the highest point in the sky. It then simply divides that travel time into 3 equal segments to create the 11th and 12th houses. Proponents argue this is a highly logical, clean, and direct way to divide the sky based on the observer's actual location. Next are the moderate house proportions. Because of its straightforward math, Alcabitius tends to produce charts with relatively balanced house sizes. It is far less prone to creating interceptions, where an astrological sign is completely swallowed up inside a giant house and has no cusp of its own. Compared to Placidus or Koch. 3. The historical gold standard. Alcabitius was the undisputed standard for Western astrology for centuries, roughly the 10th to the 15th centuries. The most famous and foundational texts of medieval, early Renaissance astrology, such as those by Guido Bonatti, were written using the Alcabitius system. Traditional astrologers argue that a system used successfully by the undisputed masters of the craft for hundreds of years is inherently more reliable than modern experiments. Why the others are viewed as less reliable from the perspective of a practicing Alcabitius user who watches the observable patterns, both in history and lived out in a human life. The other popular systems have distinct flaws, either mathematically or historically. Placidus is overly complex and prone to distortion. The critique, Placidus is the default system on most free astrology websites today, but its math is incredibly convoluted. Instead of just tracking the ascendant like Alcabitius, Placidus tries to divide the time it takes every single degree of the zodiac to rise and set. The flaw is this hyper-complex math causes the system to buckle very easily. Even at moderate latitudes, like London or Seattle, Placidus can create wildly distorted charts where some houses are massive and others are tiny. The accidental dominance critics point out that Placidus isn't the most popular system today because it is the most accurate. It is popular because Placidus tables were the easiest and cheapest to mass print during the early 20th century astrology revival. Koch the modern and ahistorical the critique is the Koch system was invented in the 20th century. Traditional astrologers view it as an ahistorical modern invention with no foundational texts or centuries of empirical observation backing it up. The flaw being like Placidus, it frequently creates extreme house distortions and massive interceptions, leading to what critics argue are unbalanced and unrealistic chart interpretations. Equal house and whole sign systems are spatial. They abandon time entirely and just chop the zodiac up into 30-degree slices based on the ascendant. While these systems never break down at high latitudes, Alcabitius proponents argue they are less reliable because they ignore the physical astronomical reality of the sky. In equal house, the actual midheaven, the literal highest point the sun reaches in the sky on that day, is often ignored or floating randomly in the 9th or 11th house, rather than anchoring the 10th house cusp, where quadrant astrologers believe it belongs, the grounded reality. If you value what has been rigorously tested over centuries of observation and used by masters of this art, Alcabitius has a proven track record of being the most reliable choice. The true test is in the accuracy you see in the timing of events, the patterns you see in your own life and those around you. Now, the app landscape, I'll keep this tight because you have the framework to evaluate it yourself. The social apps made astrology accessible to millions, good at what they do, but no Fredaria, no perfections, no traditional dignity. When you start asking why certain years hit the way they did, they can't answer. The modern psychological apps are built on different premises, outer planets as primary drivers, no classical time lords. A different system, not this one. The serious calculation tools have the data, but leave all the interpretive work to you. You see the Fredaria period. The app won't tell you what it means. Professional desktop software has everything, but assumes years of training. No interpretation layer, no AI. Free chart sites don't explain what you're seeing. The gap is real. Almost nothing for the serious practitioner who has moved past the basics but isn't a professional. RADIX fills it. Fredaria and annual perfections, front and center, not buried, not optional. Alcabitius house system, sect auto-detected. Arabic lots, pre-calculated with correct sect inversion. Classical dignity scores for every planet. And the oracle, which reasons about your chart using the actual techniques this series has covered. Ask it about your Fredaria Lord. Ask which transits matter this year. Ask about the era you're living your personal timing in. The oracle is ready for all of it. Here's the question that cuts through everything. If you want to understand what planetary chapter you're living through right now, why certain years of your life felt the way they did, which transits are actually going to matter this year, and what the 14 sensitive points in your natal chart that most apps don't even calculate actually mean, that's what RADIX is built for. After 6 videos, you understand the tradition well enough to know what you're asking for. Timing techniques read before transits, annual perfections and Fredaria layered together, planetary dignity as the evaluative lens, and the Arabic lots as the natal chart's hidden layer, the outer planets as generational backdrop, not personal timing. Alcabitius as the house system this tradition was calibrated on, that is a genuinely complete foundation. The system is in your hands. 3 steps from here, enter your birth data in RADIX, everything calculated immediately, free, and generate your deep natal report, the foundation the oracle draws on for everything else. Ask the oracle anything. You now have the background to understand the answers. Sign up is free, no credit card required. The link is in the description. That's the RADIX intro series. One complete system, the tradition of Guido Bonatti, medieval astrologer, advisor to emperors, the most rigorous practitioner in the Western tradition, rebuilt with modern AI and made accessible in a way that has never existed before. The app is free to start. We'll see you inside.